You spread fertilizer on Saturday afternoon. By Monday, a strip of grass in front of your house had already turned noticeably darker green. But beneath that green color, the roots were still sitting close to the surface, and the old dry patch had not disappeared. One hot week passed, the lawn faded again, and you found yourself facing the same question. What should you buy this time? That is the strange contradiction of lawn care. The fastest visible result sometimes fixes only what is easy to see, not what keeps making the grass weak. If the previous product truly solved the cause, why does the same problem return to the exact same spot every season? A Japanese-inspired approach begins with a different question. Not, what product is the grass missing? But, what conditions are the soil and the current maintenance schedule creating? In the concept of tsuchizukuri, preparing and improving the soil comes before the visible results above it. That does not mean you never water, never fertilize, or never plant seed. It simply means that every action should address a real cause instead of reacting immediately to the color on the surface. For more Japanese-inspired systems that make your home and yard easier to maintain without turning every weekend into another project, subscribe to The Quiet Home. Here, we focus on small changes that you can continue making even when life gets busy. There is something I have noticed about lawns that always seem to need rescuing again and again. They are rarely suffering from a lack of effort. The homeowners have watered, they have mowed, they have planted seed, they have bought fertilizer. Sometimes they have even hired a professional service. The problem is that too many things are done before the cause is identified. You see pale grass, so you buy nitrogen. You see a brown patch, so you increase the watering time. You see bare soil, so you spread more seed. You see a dandelion, so you buy weed killer. Each reaction seems reasonable when you consider it by itself. And honestly, that is completely understandable. When the grass turns yellow, a bag with a picture of a deep green lawn looks like the most obvious answer. The packaging does not ask you to check how compacted the soil is, observe the direction in which water is flowing, or identify the type of grass you are growing. It only asks you to spread the product and wait for the green color to appear. But a lawn is not one uniform surface. The corner near the downspout, the area beneath a tree, and the path where the dog usually runs are dealing with 3 different conditions. A product spread across the entire yard cannot tell the difference between them. Before you open another bag, perform 3 simple checks. The first check is moisture. Do not rely only on the color of the grass or touch the top layer of soil. Push a long screwdriver into the problem area. After watering or rainfall, does it slide into the soil relatively easily? Is the soil a few inches below the surface, or roughly 8 to 10 centimeters deep, cool and moist, hard and dry, or completely saturated? A brown patch does not automatically mean that the grass needs more water. If the soil underneath is still moist, and the tips of the grass are often still wet the following morning, adding more water in the evening may make the conditions worse. If the screwdriver goes down only 1 or 2 inches, which is about 2.5 to 5 centimeters, and then stops, the soil may be so compacted that both water and roots have trouble moving deeper. If the soil is dry even below the surface, then the lawn may truly need a deeper watering session. The same brown color can come from 3 completely different causes. The second check is soil compaction. Think about the bare spot beside the back gate. You planted new seed there, but people still walk across it while taking out the trash, and the dog still runs along the same path. That bare spot is not only telling you something about the seed, it is showing you where the soil is being compacted every day. If the traffic pattern does not change, the next round of seeding will produce the same result. Use a screwdriver or garden fork to check several locations around the area. If the soil beneath the healthy grass is clearly softer than the soil in the bare spot, you have found a cause that should be addressed before you plant again. The third check is the pattern. Take a few steps back and look at the lawn as a map, not as one solid field of green. Is the problem contained within a small circle, stretched into a line, or spread evenly across the entire yard? A line of thin grass often follows foot traffic, the hot edge of a driveway, or an area that the sprinkler does not reach. A wet area around a downspout shows that water is collecting there. Small yellow spots, where a pet regularly goes to the bathroom, follow a different logic from an entire lawn that has turned pale green. Weak grass beneath a tree canopy may be related to limited sunlight and competition from tree roots, not a lack of fertilizer. The pattern helps you decide whether to treat one specific spot or inspect the entire system. This is the difference between a lawn that looks green and a lawn that can recover on its own. Grass can turn green very quickly after one application of fertilizer. But a healthy lawn also needs enough density to cover bare soil, roots that can grow downward, and the ability to handle a few days of changes to the watering schedule. You do not need to dig up the entire yard to find out which kind of lawn you have. Choose 3 locations, the healthiest area, the weakest area, and 1 location in between. Compare the moisture, the firmness of the soil, and how deeply the screwdriver can go. This takes less than 10 minutes, but it may stop you from spreading a product across the entire yard simply because one corner has its own separate problem. Your garage may already contain grass seed, weed control products, and several half-used bags of fertilizer left over from previous seasons. Each one was purchased to address a real problem, but none of them can tell you why the same section of the lawn continues to fail. The first goal is to reduce how often you have to guess. This also changes the way you look at a 4-step fertilizer program. The problem is not that every fertilizer is bad. The problem is that the same schedule cannot work equally well for cool season grass, warm season grass, sandy soil, clay soil, and lawns that experience completely different levels of use. When products are applied according to a schedule instead of actual need, the leaves may turn green quickly, while the problems involving water, roots, or compaction remain unchanged. A soil-first approach is slightly slower at the beginning. You have to look, touch, and test before you act. In return, you no longer have to try a new product every time the lawn changes color. Which problem is bothering you the most right now? Comment with 1 word: brown, weeds, bare, or yellow. Just 1 word. It is also the fastest way to determine what you should inspect first. From this point, most symptoms can be placed into 3 major groups. The first group is water and timing. This is not only about how much water the lawn receives, it is also about when the water arrives, how deeply it penetrates, and whether the leaves remain wet for too long. The second group is soil compaction and density. This is where bare spots, many weeds, and areas of thin grass often begin, even when you have planted seeds several times. The final group is biology and nutrition. This is where you need to distinguish between grub damage, disease, nutrient deficiencies, and root stress, instead of describing every problem as a need for more fertilizer. Let us begin with water, because this is one area where a lawn can easily receive too much care while still looking neglected. When a patch of grass turns brown in the middle of summer, the natural reaction is to run the sprinkler longer. But before increasing the water, look closely at the timing and the pattern. If the soil beneath the brown patch is still moist in the morning, the tips of the grass often hold water overnight, or the problem appears during hot and humid weeks. Adding more water in the evening may extend the amount of time that the leaves remain wet. That does not prove that the lawn has a fungal disease. However, it may create favorable conditions for certain diseases to develop. One small change worth trying is moving the main watering session to the morning early enough for the water to enter the soil and for the leaves to dry during the day. The goal is to allow the water to soak into the soil without keeping the leaves wet throughout a warm night. I understand why many people water in the evening. That is often when the workday is over, the children are inside, and you finally have a few minutes to look at the yard. The most convenient time for the person taking care of the lawn is not always the best time for the grass. A sprinkler that runs briefly every day may also moisten only the top layer of soil. After watering, check a few inches below the surface, which is roughly 8 to 10 centimeters deep. If the surface is wet but the root zone is still dry, the lawn needs a deeper watering session, not another light watering session. The exact frequency still depends on the soil type, grass type, rainfall, and local climate. Sandy soil that drains quickly does not behave like clay soil that holds water. A hot, dry week is also very different from a week with scattered rain. What you are trying to create is a root zone that receives water, not merely a surface that always looks damp. Pet spots are a clear example of why you should not treat the entire yard in the same way. If small DL spots are concentrated exactly where your pet usually goes to the bathroom, adding more fertilizer to the entire lawn may make the problem worse. Animal urine can create a concentrated area of nitrogen and salts. The problem is limited to one small location. It does not mean that the entire lawn needs more fertilizer. When you see your pet use a particular spot, pouring water directly onto that area may help dilute the concentration. For areas that are already completely dead, treat them as bare spots after you have changed how the area is used. Do not simply plant new seed and allow the same thing to happen every day. Water may also arrive from a direction you did not intentionally create. A corner of the yard that always remains saturated after rain probably does not need more seed or fertilizer. Look at the downspout, the slope of the ground, and the path that water follows from the roof. If most of the water from the roof is discharged into one small area, the grass roots may be left in low oxygen conditions, while the soil underneath becomes increasingly compacted and poorly drained. Before considering a major drainage system, begin with the most visible issue. Extend the downspout, redirect the water away from the low area, or create a safe path for surface water to escape. If water still remains for a long time after the simple causes have been addressed, then you can consider a more detailed assessment. Always have underground utility lines located before digging. Once the water problem is understood correctly, bare spots also become easier to understand. A bare spot beside the gate may germinate after reseeding and then disappear again only a few weeks later. Before blaming the seed, look at whether people, mower wheels, or pets continue moving across the same location. Grass seed cannot repair a traffic pattern. If the soil is constantly being stepped on, the first step may be to install stepping stones, create a clearly defined path, or accept that the area should have a surface designed to handle foot traffic. This is one of the most useful observations I have found. Sometimes a lawn does not fail because of the way you are growing the grass. It fails because you are asking the grass to perform a job that it is not suited to perform. After reducing the pressure on the surface, check the soil for compaction. Push a garden fork into several locations around the bare area. You do not need to turn over all of the soil. The goal is to determine whether water, air, and roots have a path downward. If the fork can barely penetrate the soil when it is adequately moist, spreading more seed on top will only create a layer of young grass with nowhere to establish its roots. A very thin layer of finished compost can add organic material and support the structure of the soil surface. However, compost cannot replace correcting foot traffic, drainage, or deep compaction. Each step works only when it matches the cause. Weeds should also be read as a pattern. One dandelion does not mean that the lawn is failing, but if weeds repeatedly appear in areas where the grass is thin, more sunlight reaches the soil, and the ground is frequently disturbed, they are taking advantage of space that the turf has not covered. You can remove the weeds that are already present, preferably when the soil is soft so that you can remove more of the roots. But if the ground remains exposed, another weed will use the same open space. The long-term solution involves appropriate density, a suitable mowing height, and a type of grass that can survive in the actual conditions of that area. Overseeding may be helpful for certain cool season lawns, but the timing and the type of seed must be suitable for the climate. Warm season grass may require a completely different schedule and method. This is why a bag labeled sun and shade does not automatically solve the problem in a dark corner beneath a large tree. If the area receives too little light, faces strong competition from tree roots, and experiences frequent foot traffic, forcing it to remain like the lawn in the middle of the yard may create far more work than value. However, there is another group of problems that is more difficult because it cannot be diagnosed simply by looking from the driveway. You step onto a patch of grass and notice that it feels unusually soft. When you pull gently, the turf lifts almost like a piece of carpet. This may indicate that the root system has been damaged, and grubs are one possibility that should be investigated. The word may is important. Not every loose patch of turf is caused by grub damage. Look beneath the turf, count the larvae within a small area, and compare what you find with recommendations from your local cooperative extension office. Finding a few grubs in the soil does not automatically mean that you need to treat the entire yard. Many lawns can tolerate low populations without significant damage. If grub damage has been confirmed, beneficial nematodes may be a biological option under certain conditions. Their effectiveness depends on the correct species, soil temperature, moisture, and application timing. Consult local guidance instead of choosing a product simply because the label says natural. The principle remains the same. Confirm the problem first, then use the smallest intervention that is likely to solve it. Yellow color across the entire lawn requires the same patience. Yellow grass may be related to nutrition, soil acidity, water, root stress, mowing practices, or disease. Adding nitrogen or iron before checking the cause may create only a temporary change, or it may create no change at all. Look at the pattern first. If only one area near the downspout is yellow, inspect the water conditions. If pale lines match the tracks left by the mower wheels, review the way you are mowing. If the entire lawn changes color relatively evenly, even though the moisture appears consistent, that is when a soil test becomes more valuable than continued guessing. The same fertilizer program applied to every yard cannot know your grass type, the acidity of your soil, the amount of organic matter, or how many hours of shade your lawn receives each day. It knows only the schedule printed on the package. Diagnosis sometimes takes longer than buying a product. You may have to kneel down, touch the soil, inspect the roots, or wait for the results of a soil test. But 5 minutes of careful observation can save you from spending weeks on the wrong treatment. Of these 3 changes, which would you like to try first? Mowing higher, watering more deeply, or testing the soil before buying anything? Comment with exactly one choice. Choosing one small change first is usually more realistic than trying to repair the entire lawn during the same weekend. Even when every brown patch, bare spot, and area of yellow grass has been treated correctly, those problems can return if the maintenance schedule continues creating the same conditions. Mowing too low removes shade from the soil and makes it more difficult for the grass to recover during hot weather. Watering lightly and too frequently keeps the roots close to the surface. Planting seed during the wrong season forces young grass to compete during the most unfavorable conditions. Applying products on a fixed schedule causes you to act before you know what the lawn actually needs. Repairing one patch of grass is the easy part. Preventing it from returning depends on a few small habits performed at the right time. A good lawn care schedule does not begin with a bag labeled Step 1. It begins with the grass type, the climate, and the period when the grass is capable of recovering. Cool season grass, warm season grass, sandy soil, and clay soil cannot follow the same schedule. The general principle is to perform each task when the lawn is capable of benefiting from it, not simply when an advertisement says the season has arrived. The first thing to review is often the mowing height. Many people lower the mower before a busy week because they assume that cutting the grass shorter will allow them to wait longer before mowing again. On Saturday afternoon, the lawn looks flat, neat, and almost like a golf course. But after several hot days, more soil is exposed, the grass loses color more quickly, and the weak areas begin to look faded. A residential lawn does not need to be cut like a golf course. Golf courses use completely different grass varieties, equipment, irrigation systems, and maintenance schedules. For many cool season grasses, keeping the leaves taller during hot weather can help shade the soil and support the root system more effectively than mowing too low. Warm season grass may require a different height. Instead of searching online for one number that supposedly works everywhere, check the recommendations for your specific grass type. A more practical rule is to avoid removing more than about 1/3 of the grass blade during a single mowing session. If the lawn has grown tall while you were away, do not immediately cut it down to the lowest setting. Remove part of the height, wait a few days, and then adjust it again. I once believed that the shorter a freshly cut lawn looked, the better it had been maintained. But when you look more closely, a healthy lawn is not the lawn with the closest cut at all times. It is the lawn that can make it through a hot week without needing to be rescued immediately afterward. The watering rhythm should also be separated from the timer. Do not run the sprinkler simply because the schedule says it is time. When the soil in the root zone is dry and the grass begins showing signs of water stress, apply enough water for the soil to absorb it deeply. If water begins running off the surface, divide the watering session into several shorter cycles instead of continuing one long cycle. After mowing, you also do not necessarily need to collect every grass clipping in a bag. When the lawn is mowed regularly, the clippings are short, and there are no clear signs of disease. Leaving the clippings in place can return some organic material and nutrients to the soil surface. They usually break down much faster than many people expect, and they do not automatically create thatch. However, this is not an absolute rule. If the grass has grown too tall, the clippings form thick piles, or the lawn has a disease, collect or spread them out instead of allowing a wet layer of material to cover the grass. You still need to observe the lawn before applying any rule. The goal is not to replace one rigid schedule with another rigid schedule. Compost should be approached in the same way. A thin, even layer of finished compost applied while the lawn is growing under suitable conditions may add organic matter to the soil surface. But more does not mean better. A layer that is too thick can bury the grass, create an uneven surface, and turn a small task into a major project. You do not need an entire truckload of compost for your first attempt. Try it on a small area with weak soil, spread a very thin layer, and observe how the lawn responds during the following weeks. The same principle applies to aeration. Not every lawn needs to be aerated every year. If a screwdriver enters the soil easily, water penetrates well, and the grass does not experience heavy foot traffic, you may not need to do anything. Aeration is most valuable when the soil is genuinely compacted. The timing should also correspond with the active growth period of your grass type. For many cool season lawns, this is usually during cooler weather. Warm season lawns usually recover more effectively when they are actively growing in warm conditions. What matters is not spring or fall as one rule for the entire country. What matters is whether the grass has enough time and the right conditions to recover after the soil has been opened. Overseeding requires the same level of caution. A bag of seed cannot correct deep shade, constant foot traffic, poor drainage, or hard soil. Before planting, ask yourself this question. If the seed germinates successfully, what will be different this time so that the young grass can survive? You may need to redirect the path first. You may need to adjust the watering schedule. You may need to loosen the surface of the soil. The previous seed may not have been suitable for the climate or the amount of sunlight. For cool season lawns, planting when the soil is still warm enough, but the air is beginning to cool, is often beneficial. Warm season grasses follow a different schedule. One consultation with your local cooperative extension office may prevent you from spreading dozens of pounds of seed, which is roughly 10 or more kilograms, during the seasons when the grass is least likely to establish itself. And then we return to the most important step when the problem is widespread: a soil test. If the entire lawn repeatedly turns yellow, remains thin, or responds poorly, even though the watering and mowing practices appear reasonable, a soil sample may reveal the acidity level, certain nutrient levels, and other factors that cannot be identified by sight. A soil test does not answer every question about the lawn, but it is more reliable than trying nitrogen, iron, lime, and other products one after another until something produces a temporary change. This is where the 3 initial checks become especially useful. Moisture, compaction, and pattern help you eliminate the obvious causes. When the problem is still widespread, a soil test gives you a more reliable next step than trying another product. You do not need to do all of this during one weekend. In fact, the best maintenance system is usually one that still works during a week when you have to work late, take the children to school, handle household responsibilities, and no longer have 4 hours to spend outside. A lawn should not require you to react with a new product every time the weather changes. This also means accepting that not every piece of ground around the house needs to become turf grass. The corner beneath a large tree may receive too little sunlight. The path from the patio to the shed may experience foot traffic too frequently. The area beside the fence may always remain wet or may be difficult to reach with the mower. You can continue spreading seed there every season, or you can give the area a purpose that better fits its conditions. A locally suitable ground cover, mulch, stepping stones, or a narrow planting bed may be much easier to maintain. This does not mean giving up on the lawn. It means no longer forcing grass to live in conditions that it repeatedly shows it cannot tolerate. There is one perspective from Japanese-inspired garden systems that I especially appreciate. An area does not have to look like every other part of the yard to feel complete. The sunny area can be lawn. The shaded area can be ground cover. A walkway can become a real walkway instead of remaining a failed bare spot. When each area is used according to its actual conditions, the yard begins to require fewer rescue operations. The central lesson is not that fertilizer is always bad, sprinklers are always wrong, or a natural lawn should require no maintenance at all. The lesson is that you should not allow a surface symptom to determine the next product you buy. Pause before spreading something across the entire yard simply because one corner has changed color. When the grass turns yellow, examine the pattern before fertilizing. When a spot becomes bare, inspect the foot traffic before planting seed. When the lawn turns brown, check the soil before increasing the water. When weeds appear, examine the density and the conditions of the area instead of merely counting how many plants need to be removed. That is how the amount of work begins to decrease. It is not because the lawn stops changing. It is because you stop creating 3 additional problems while trying to solve the first one. This week, begin with 3 small steps. Step 1. Choose exactly one area of the lawn that is failing. Do not inspect the entire yard, and do not create a list of 10 tasks. Choose only the brown patch, bare spot, or thin area that attracts your attention the most. Step 2. Perform the 3 checks: moisture below the surface, compaction using a screwdriver, and the pattern of the problem. Ask what is different about this area compared with the healthy part of the lawn. Step 3. Choose exactly one action that matches the cause you observed. Change the watering time. Raise the mower by 1 setting. Redirect the downspout. prevent foot traffic from crossing the young grass, send a soil sample for testing, or stop planting more grass in an area that does not receive enough sunlight. Then record the date when you will inspect the area again. You do not need to purchase an entire seasonal program. You only need to see whether one change actually improves the conditions. An easy-to-maintain lawn is not created by the strongest bag on the shelf. It begins when you understand what you are repairing and have enough patience to allow the soil to do its part. Subscribe to The Quiet Home, and then watch the video about the Japanese outdoor room principle to learn how to transform the yard around your home into a space you genuinely want to use, rather than simply another surface that requires maintenance.